Hey guys, welcome. Now let give it a 2 minutes here just till everyone kind of collects, and this will be recorded. So again, don't worry about it. There'll be plenty of time for everybody to see this in recording, right? We're gonna draw something kind of cool today. Something that comes from the sea. I'll give you a hint. It's something that a lot of artists like to draw in the tiki world. Okay, let's see, guys in the poop deck. Stop the music for me, please. I've got to get busy here. Okay, so what I want to do is again talk about picking up on where we left off, because the idea of contour is so important that I want to continue this thinking, so that if some of you are actually doing this and playing around with it, you'll get a little more reinforcement if I just kind of keep a little bit of sense to where things go, right? So remember the analogy I talked about the tape, that you wrap tape around an object. Use something that you have at home. I mean, we all have certain things around the house too, and you could wrap tape around it. But I mean, draw something that's interesting. Typical things you have at home, like these dental teeth, for example. Some of you might have a genie bottle. Typical regular basic genie bottle. I don't know. There's this clanky syrup bottle from the 1960s. That's a real cool, and there's a lot of contour on that one, I'll tell you that. I don't know, another common object you might have is an old gas mask maybe laying around the house. They have a lot of really cool contours on these hoses. Look at that. Okay. So, again, when you do your own sketches, find something at home that you can work with, that's laying around your house, and that you enjoy working, with, and you have an interest in. Okay. You know what we're going to do is we're going to do that technique I told you about, that a lot of the animators and some of the comic book artists and everyone use, and that's called the blue line. And I'm working on the equivalent of a brown bag from the grocery store. It's just brown parchment paper here today, because I may introduce a couple of fun things that we're going to be getting into later on. But just use a regular piece of paper if you want, and use a pencil and go lightly instead of using a blue line. You can get these at an art store. The blue pencils, they're called non-photo blue, and they're great to work with as an underdrawing. Remember I talked about the underdrawing? So let's start with the idea. Rather than doing this whole squiggly thing again, let's do an underdrawing of an octopus. And I'm going to do a light sketch. And you can do things like make it up or find some pictures online and start to do the basic shapes of an octopus. An octopus has this weird kind of egg-shaped head. It's got these kind of connected round circular eye areas here, and it's got really this sort of mass below it that's sort of a funnel-shaped goofy thing that kind of joins these things together. And out of that usually is where you have the legs. I'm going to keep these, the tentacles. I'm going to keep these tentacles short. You can probably barely see this, and that's exactly what I want. Hopefully you see it enough, what I'm doing. I'm just kind of half making it up and half looking at a little picture I have of an octopus. And I'm just kind of doing an outline of this cute little baby octopus whose tentacles are kind of short because he's just a baby, right? Okay. So now we have the outline. This is where most of you are used to starting, really. When you first start to draw as a kid, you always start with an outline. Sometimes you try to fill things in, this and that. But it's a good way to start after you understand or after you've been introduced to that idea of the contour that I taught you in the first lesson, because you can start with something you're familiar with, an outline, and then kind of apply the principles that I taught you about contour. So that's what we're going to do here. I'm really worried that this maybe isn't showing up the blue very well. You know, because of that, I'm going to do it, even though you're going to see more of it than I want, but I'm going to do it in red too. Does that show up any better? Yeah, that shows up a little bit better. Here's our outline of the octopus. Okay. You can make it a little bit simpler. This kind of is short for tentacles for an octopus, but it helps me keep it simple for the principle that I'm about to do. Yeah, that's kind of showing up in there. Okay, so this is a basic octopus. Remember, we've got the shape of the head. We've got this bottom portion here that connects it, and then the legs, tentacles. Why do I keep saying legs? I know better than that. I've seen a lot of octopi, and we have that underneath it. It also has, just because I know this, I think they call this a siphon. It's a tube that comes off the side of an octopus's head. I used to have an octopus, by the way. I really honestly had an octopus in a tank. I had a big saltwater tank, a whole lot of fish, 200-gallon tank, and I used to dive and put fish in it even. And then I had to have an octopus, and sure enough, I got the octopus I want, and it ended up having an octopus that started this big, and it ended up to be an octopus about that big, and every other fish in the tank was gone. And they had a big fat octopus for like 2 years that ate everything else. So anyway, they're interesting characters. So here's our outline drawing. Now let's do what we did the other day. Remember the contour? Remember the idea of tape? If you were to wrap tape, and this should be intuitive. In other words, I haven't taught you perspective yet, like they would in a school traditionally, and for months and months of perspective and things like that. I'm trying to teach you a little bit of intuitive drawing where you look at it and something starts to feel right. If something feels right, and you get a sense of that, you're going to grow with your intuitive drawing really before you even get into the real principles of perspective and things like that. So again, let's wrap the top, his head, in tape. Remember, it's going back. We tried to figure out when we drew the tree what makes something look like it's going back in space. This arrow, the three-dimensional arrow that's going back. What makes something go back? Well, we found out that if we curved it this way, when we were doing a branch, remember that? It tended to make it feel like it was going into the big white box of fog that I talked about. Well, this is more like smog. It's not fog because of the brown paper. So, but it's going into this murk. So I want that head to go back. So I'm gonna do my squiggles that way. There goes the head. It's going back in space because I'm wrapping tape around it. Then I'm going to wrap tape around this ball-like thing. I'm going to wrap tape to make it go back into the page on that side. Then I'm going to change the direction. Remember how we always talked about the squiggles, how if you went like this on the page, that all of a sudden if you change and go this way, it's going to make a difference. It's going to make that branch looks like it's coming around like this, and flipping around. You know, you're going like this, and you're switching directions. Well, let's do that with, for example, this bottom part. The head's going back, but now we want it to kind of straighten up and go down. So when we wrap the tape around it, we're going to now not go this way with our squiggle. We're going to go the other direction. What that does is it makes this octopus kind of change its bend, its curvature. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to attack the tentacles. These are exactly like the tree trunks we did. I'm going to start up here at the base, and I'm going to go, okay, I'm going back, just like we had a tree trunk that was going back in space. In other words, it's going like this. There's our arrow that's showing where it's going. It's going back in space towards the body. Now, right here, we're going to swing it around, and then right about here, I'm going to switch the other way, the curve, so that it comes out and switches and goes back. Here comes another one. I'm sorry, I again kind of made a little mistake here. This is going back in space as far as this tentacle is joining the thing, but it's going back in space and coming forward and bending around. So again, intuitively, this is where you mess around with. If you have an eraser, you can go, oh shoot, I made the lines the wrong way, and that's okay. This is where you try to figure things out. So this tentacle I'm going to make come forward, sorry, this way. Then I'm going to make it bend back again. Okay. This tentacle is kind of less coming forward. It's going to go back, but real small amount. Remember, the more you curve your lines, the harder the curve is. It's not showing. The stronger your curve is, or the more circular it is, the more it's almost like controlling how hard it goes back in space. The less curved it is, like real subtle, like just barely anything but straight, then the more subtle your curvature is going to go. And again, that's intuitive. So you just kind of play around with that. Well, now, yeah, I'm going to swing that back a little bit. So I'm going to get a little more curvy here. And then I'm going to switch to make the tentacle go back, but then come forward just before it goes around this area. And we may just see the tip of that tentacle. I don't know. Actually, I drew it up there. But you can change your drawing it any way you want all the way along. That's the great part about this. And this tentacle is behind the body here. So it's really going to go squiggle it back. And then I'm going to change directions. And then I'm going to come around here and go like that. So this, again, here's our red underdrawing. We pretended we're wrapping tape around it, and we start to get a sense. We look at it, and you eyeball it. Now, you may not have gotten it as easily as I did here, or you may have. But if you play around with this idea, like I showed you in the first lesson, you really start to get a sense of what starts to work. And everyone knows. You don't have to be an artist to know what's looking three-dimensional and what isn't. Anybody knows, because everyone lives in the same world. Most of the time, that is. I live in other worlds as frequently as possible. So anyway, so now we have what's called an underdrawing. So all these lines on it. Eventually this won't show. This will be something that, now, and then you can draw over like where the eye is going to be. The eye is going to be right about there. And we may see the side of the eye on this thing a little, on this side of the octopus a little bit. I'm not sure. You can look, that's why when you want to look at your reference, if you're drawing from something, you want to kind of get an idea of what it's doing. But really, like I said, the idea that you should be going for in these exercises I'm doing, including what I'm doing here, you're not going for a beautiful finished drawing. You're doing the drawing to learn something. It's about learning. It's like a surgeon going and going into anatomy school and playing around with a cadaver and learning about surgical techniques and how to, make sutures and everything like that. This is like that. This is practicing principles and getting a feel with your hand and developing the skill. And you don't have to show everybody every single drawing you do. Some are for your own self to learn. And then you get better and better, and then pretty soon, you're less timid about drawing in front of people. So there's our underdrawing. So now like I said, this. Many of the comic book artists, everybody does this, and they will then go from here and start to go with a black ink or a soft pencil and start to define their drawing. They'll erase all of this, or they'll use a technique. If they're using a digital drawing board, they'll do this on a layer in Photoshop, for example, and then once they're done with their drawing layer on top of the ink drawing, they'll just remove the underlayer of all this thinking junk, and they'll just have a beautiful drawing that has a lot of three-dimension to it. Okay, so here we go. Now, as I go, I've got a tiny junky little picture here, so I'm going to have to make up a lot of this stuff, but I may look at this octopus and other octopi and find other things that I want. But so here we go. Let's look at these lines, what we can do with them. What are these contour lines going to do? Well, remember I told you don't have to draw every line, but you need to draw some important lines. So right here, these curving lines, I'm going to set just a few little wrinkles in here. Because anytime you bend your arm or you bend a tube, a straight tube, or cloth, clothes, you get a wrinkle on the side that's being compressed, and then you get a straight or stretched area on the opposite side. That's a whole nother lesson I'll get into, but so let's keep the other side straight. We're not even going to do any contour lines on that. We're not going to use the contour lines on that yet. But as we get around here, maybe I want to use those lines underneath. See how they curve? Use those as my guide for a few more wrinkles. Then remember the tentacle goes underneath and it kind of comes up. And I'm shaking purposely because I'm trying to give some texture to the octopus. You can be perfectly straight. You can do this in a series of lines. Some people draw that way. They make a curve and they like to use a series of lines. That's totally okay. That's what develops a person's style. So then we have the front of the octopus here, front edge. And remember, it's going in front of this. So we're just going to use that same red line we had before. We're going to go around here, carry it on the outside. Now here again, we can do the same thing. We can go, hey, let's just right about here. Let's take these contour lines and let's make a couple of wrinkles there. Here, we're not going to do anything with it. Here, I'm just going to, maybe I'll take one or two. This I'm going to keep relatively straight. I'm going to let this part of the octopus go completely like that, because I'm going to pretend the eye is on just the other side of where we see it there. Here's our contour lines. See those contour lines stretching back this way? When I put them on this half circle just to make the tape curl around this way. Well, that now becomes your guide for where to put perhaps that eyeball on that side. It's being influenced, the curve of where the eye is inside this weird socket is being completely influenced by this underdrawing we did. Wrapping tape. And do this if you really want to learn something. Again, take an everyday object like I showed you, like a genie bottle, and go get some white tape, your masking tape, or something like that, some cheap tape. You can cut masking tape in two or three times lengthwise so you get thinner tape. And just take it and wrap it all around this thing. Wrap it all the way that way and draw it. Then if it's thin enough, you can wrap it that way and do a layer this way. And you'll get a grid on there, and you will really learn a lot. If you only draw those lines of the tape and don't pay any other attention to anything else, you'll instantly get this dimensional genie bottle that you can later edit out that grid and have a pretty cool drawing. Keep going on the octopus here. So Same thing on this part of the eye. Remember, you can see the lines I drew in this way because I just felt like making the eye kind of go in this direction. Here's our opening to our eyeball, which goes something like this. And I'm just going to use, now I'm gonna probably just not do anything except on this, except use a little bit of this curvature on the bottom of the eye. But then see these lines coming through here? I'm gonna make some wrinkles on that octopus's under his eye. All I'm doing is using the lines that I already established, give it a sense of curve and volume, and I'm saying, okay, I know how to make lines in order to make that feel that that roundness, but I'm only going to use that information in this one area. I don't need it here, and I don't need it there. That was just thinking drawings. So we got that. Now we have that thing. Remember I called it the siphon? Well, here's the siphon, and it's coming out this way. Well, we could do the same thing. We could put a couple of wrinkles right at the base of the siphon and make it come out here like this. And don't use any other lines. Really, all the lines that would be going like this, we don't need that. We just need a couple of clues as to which direction that siphon is going. Anyway. Okay. So, and an octopus usually, I mean, they have strange eyes. They sometimes go like, often like that. They have a weird little thing in there, inside the eye of the octopi. Inside the eye of the octopi. Okay, so now, again, I'm going to kind of speed this up so we're not going on and on and on forever. Here we got you see the information here. Well, right about here, hey, I'll pick up a couple of those little lines just to show a wrinkle. Here, hey, let's show a few wrinkles there. Here, if I was getting it, I'm not going to, well, let's see. Let me show you something. Had I done something where I was really trying to make this very real like an octopus, I would have thought about it also and thought that, okay, these wrinkles, this goes like this, but then the bottom of an octopus tentacle then would actually flatten out a little bit. That your tape would go round until it hit here and flattened out. Because if this underside of the octopus was showing, this is where you start to see the suction cups. And they would go all the way up until they turned around and into the other side where we didn't see them. But I don't want to confuse you the more than I already have, probably. So let's stay away from too much of that. Okay, so we got those wrinkles, and we'll just do a regular line here. That tentacle. This is where technically, if I were going to draw it, maybe we'd see some evidence of the suction cups. It's hard to think sometimes and draw and teach all at the same time. It's like totally different parts of the brain. Here's the top of the head. The only reason I'm making broken lines here is to create texture. Okay, as though, because really octopus have a lot of pebbly little warty things, and they can change textures and everything. See these lines that we made to make it go back? Well, once again, the only place I'm going to choose to use those maybe is a few wrinkles on the bottom of the head to give a clue which direction this is going. Now, if other things you can do are say, okay, I also want this to be a striped octopus, a striped-headed octopus. Well, then you could use these lines to guide your stripes on the octopus that would help you get it exactly looking like the way the stripes would go on a striped octopus, if there's such a thing. Okay, again, the top of this, Then I'm going to use this to wrinkle it back right about there. Maybe put a few wrinkles here. This opposite side is really nice and tight because the compression is inside. Same as here. Again, this could be the area where the suction cups are. If it's only aimed this way, and it might turn again here, but I don't want you to worry too much about that. I'm trying not to add too many details on this. Then there probably would be another tentacle that you'd see way in the background, and it probably would be curving back like this somehow, way back in there. Okay? So anyway, so now you can see, it doesn't take long to start to see that these curves, or these these contour lines become very useful in knowing or describing dimensional form. But you only use that information where you need to in order to suggest the realities of the anatomy of this creature. So then you've got a drawing. If you were to get rid of all of these underlying drawings here, you'd have this very dimensional piece. And this is not the best octopus I've drawn by far, but I think it describes a principle of what I'm talking about, how to use contour lines. Okay? Okay, so real quick, if you ever want to draw on these brown bags or these parchment paper, they're really great because not only can you do line, but then later on when we'll get into all this, but when you get into things like light sources and you know what things you can do to make something start to have dimension with light and things, these brown bags allow you to kind of go in both directions. They allow you to be able to add lights and get some form of dimension that way. And you'd be surprised at how little you have to do. These are just kind of like highlights I'm doing on these tentacles, and yet it gives a little bit of dimensionality, you know, to that octopus, octopi. I can't remember which one it is. Anyway, you know what's great is I don't have to draw a map on these parchment papers. I can use them for fun things like drawing. Okay, this demo might be getting a little long here. If it is, just shut me off. But otherwise, you know, watch what you can in your own time. I'm going to do one more drawing real quick and see if I can help you. Well, we have a choice. Let's see here. Okay, I got one. How about if we were to do real quick, since everyone likes tropical stuff and Tahitian stuff and all that kind of stuff, I'm just going to quickly draw a fish, for example, just so I can. I'm trying to do similar things here so that you can do the same thing more than once and practice the principles. So, you know, and use when you're drawing something, or draw, especially if you're looking at something or whatever, just be as simple as you can with the forms. You can also even make them kind of, when you're first drawing it, sort of sketchy and refigure it out, and you know, like, hey, does that work? Is that area of that eye going to be the right size? I mean, be loose with it at first, especially with these underdrawings, because that's the whole idea of an underdrawing, is to think. It's to say, am I doing it right, or am I getting it? No, I got to change this, I got to change that. And so they're your opportunity to play around and do that. So it's a picture I've got of a lionfish for example. It's kind of weird because you don't see its tail in this photograph, so I may fake that a little bit and put a tail back there. But I just want to do it just again to give you an idea how to use the same principle we just did, but I'm going to go a lot faster. Okay, the lionfish has stripes. I'm going to squiggle it like this way to move it backwards, to move this back of the body in this direction. Then the tape would go straight up over the fin. The stripes tend to go over the eye like this, instead of side to side, where it's like the stripe is going up of the tape over this weird eye shape, down over the lens, and then it's kind of coming down here like this. Then it comes over here, over the lip. You'll see different things happen as it goes over the lip of the fish, for example. And actually, the stripes don't do exactly what I'm showing, but I'm going to make them do this because it reinforces the principle of what I'm trying to teach. And then this is just a fin comes out. Those really don't do much for us with contour line. Anyway, so this one, for example, same thing. Real quick. The eye of this fish is somewhere in here. There's a stripe that comes down over the top of this, like the tape that I have underneath, and it kind of comes down and disappears here. So now what I'm doing is I'm using that contour line for another purpose. Rather than wrinkles, I'm using the contour line to show stripes. There's another stripe here, but if you were to have drawn tape around it, you'll notice that the tape will not be seen right around that little piece of eyeball that comes out, eye socket, and then the stripe will come on down here like that. Contour line continues. This one's thicker, and look how it bends back. I'm bending back and using those contour lines in these stripes. It's the same thing we did. You could go even further and do like we do with the tree and make tons of lines and see if it's bending in the right direction for you. And then we have the whole canopy, and I'll simplify it here. The whole canopy and the detailing of the fin. And this then continues. The striping kind of comes front of this eye. It then kind of comes forward here and disappears. The tape disappears right before the lip, then comes out, and it curves over the lip, then comes down and curves back down over the lip like that. Same thing we're doing, but it's just the tape. The tape has to go over a different form than just a nice round form. It goes over this sharp form that forms the upper lip. And then you don't really see anything else here. And he's got this weird lip that kind of comes down here like this. It's a strange looking fish. Our tape then, let's see, comes around the lip. Comes down and around the bottom. Something like this. Okay, and then you kind of see, just like the other thing, the other eye on the other side. And you may see a stripe, on there. Actually, the stripe would go this way. I shouldn't have markered that so fast. That's why it's important to do the underdrawing to really figure out what you're drawing first before you commit with these hard lines, especially if you're doing it this way. And then again, the various details that you can emulate on the fin, you can just kind of look at a piece of paper. I mean, look at a reference on that. But this again, this fish, the only reason it's taking on dimension of any form at all is because we're using this principle of contour. And in this case, instead of wrinkles as the reality of what the contour lines are, it happens to be the stripes on the markings of this particular species of fish. All right. Bloop, 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 bloop. There you go. Okay. So, again, practice this. Play around with the idea of the underdrawing of contour and understand why you're doing it. It's because you're going to do other things on top that are going to help you create dimension on a drawing later on. Okay? What we're going to get into next is I'm going to show you how to do more hard edge things. We're doing some more we're doing a lot of organic things, and that's actually good right now. You really should be focusing on organic first, because when you start getting into perspective and harder edged pieces, going off the thing here, then there's a whole lot of other stuff you got to deal with. But you actually can do a lot of the same stuff we're doing here with contour on hard edge things. It's just that those lines, instead of going like this in a curvature, they're much more, that tape is taking harder turns when it goes around an object. And you can still do a grid though, and sketch a grid and then use only certain lines for it. We'll get to that next. Okay, so we'll leave it at that. Some of you are at work, and you can eat your sandwich now. And we'll get more into this in a few days. Okay, hope you enjoyed it. We'll see you again soon. You know what? Why do I have such a hard time turning this off? Is it me? Is it just me?